Hello folks, welcome to El Canal Channel Jose. Today we're going to give you an idea how you can replace the drum brakes cylinders for the rear system on a 1958 to 1967 Volkswagen Beetle or a 1958 to 1967 karmann Ghia. And with that said, let's get started. So now we have put our car in jack stands. We have taken the wheel off. And now what we have to do is we have to add some WD-40 here. So now that we have added some WD-40, what we have to do is we have to unbend or pin, and then once we pull it out through, we're gonna undo the nut, and that's gonna allow us to take the drum out. Without taking this pin out, we can't take the nut out. So now that we took our pin out, we're gonna use a 1 7/16 socket for this nut. So we're gonna be using our impact gun to take that out. So now that we took our nut off, we're gonna have to tap this drum straight out. And there's some sort of a gears where this guy guides into it, so that way you won't be able to spin it. You're gonna have to tap it straight out. And we're gonna show you what we mean by that. Slowly from both sides, slowly, without damaging it. See what we mean, guys? This is some gears, and there's some gears in here that line up with this. So don't damage these and don't damage these. So that's why we say just tap it straight out evenly, so that way you don't damage this. So once you get that drum out, we expose the cylinder that we have to replace. So the first thing we have to do to remove this cylinder, we have to get this spring off of this brake shoe, undo it, so that way the shoes spread out and we can get them out of this groove. That's the first thing we do. Take the spring out because that pulls the shoes towards the cylinder. So now we have our spring taken out from the brake shoes, and what we can do is we can take off this brake line. And to take that brake line off, we're going to be using a 7/16 tubing wrench, so that way we don't damage that nut. So we take off that, and then after we do that, we spread out our brake shoes from the top, and then we can undo that bolt right there, which is a 13 millimeter, so we can take the cylinder towards the outside. As we're looking at our cylinder, this is our little cylinder. We're looking right there, and the cylinder is like this. This part over here goes through a hole, just rounding out for that. That shows all of it on this side. And you see the bolt? Well, the bolt goes into that hole. And then the brake line goes into this, where this plug is. This is our bleed off nipple that we're gonna need to get the air out through. But this is sitting like this. So this goes to the outside or the inside of the axle. So now let's continue taking that one off. So now the brake line is undo, just pull it out a little bit and put it to the side. They're a little bit flexible, but you don't want to break them because these are really hard to make again. So now that you undid your brake line, what you do is you're gonna spread out the brake shoes, so that way they come off from the cylinder where the groove is, and then we can undo the 13 millimeter bolt that is holding the cylinder towards the structure. So now what we did is we pressed the cylinder in, which is this, and the brake out, so that it comes out of this groove. So that will give us a little bit more clearance to pull it out. So that way we don't have to take everything apart. So now that we've done that, we undo the bolt in the back. Now that we took off the bolt that is holding the cylinder towards this backing plate, all it is holding that cylinder in there is the rust and time. One thing you want to use is a hammer to tap the cylinder from the inner side and tap it this way. You want to tap this cylinder only if it's a bad one, because if it's a good one, you might break some components in the back that you didn't want to break. So we're going to just tap it because it's bad and bring it out. On our case, why we're replacing this one is because we don't have the time to tap this out or try to drill it out. And for what they cost, it's going to be more cost effective just to buy a new one and replace it with a new one than try to deal with this. So in our case, if we're trying to get the air out of the brake system or the lines, we couldn't because that was broken off. And on the new one, as you can see, is there. It's a fresh one. So we just took this out. We put the new one. We can bleed out the air out of the braking system. So now we're about to put our cylinder in there. So this part, it goes in first, and this bolt, where the bolt is, it has to line up with that. So what you do is you face it over, and you want to tilt it a little bit, and then push it in, and then you can twist it, turn it, so that way if any of the shoes were too in, it can line up with the little cylinder. And now that is like that, we can put the bolt in the back and then our brake line, and then we can deal with our spring at the end. So now that we put a cylinder, we take this plug that is a protector for the dust and everything. We put our brake line in there, but then if this nipple is on the way, you want to use a 932's wrench to remove the bleed off. In the meantime, you put up your brake line in there. So you remove this guy and you put the brake line in. So when you're putting your brake line in, you want to thread in as much as you can this nut by hand, and then because you don't want to cross thread this one. And once you get it in there really good, then you start tightening it with your wrench, because otherwise you're going to damage the cylinder and the threads. So now we keep on threading it until we tighten it good. Now we screw in our bleed off nipple for the air into the back so we don't forget it. We just snug it, and then we continue in the front, and then we're eventually going to come back to this and then take the air out of the system. So now that we have tightened our cylinder to the backing plate, and then we have tightened our brake line in there, we put the bleed off nipple back on. We can compress these shoes in and make them fall into the groove of each side, and then we can put our spring on. So now that we have put our cylinder, we have put everything back together, and there's the guides for the brake shoes to guide on one side and then the other side. And now we have the bleed off right here with our dust boot protector, and then the brake line in there. So we're gonna put the drum in, and then that way we can start bleeding off the air out of this cylinder by purging the air out. So now that we put everything back together, we're gonna bleed off the air out of this cylinder. And to do that, we have put a wrench on this 932's and then a hose connected to the bleed off. And then that hose is gonna go to this container to catch the oil that comes out of there. And then for that, even if you just open and close that, there's no oil gonna be coming out. To bleed off this system, we have Luis over here. He's gonna be pressing the brake pedal. And when he presses down and he has pressure build up, I'm gonna have to open this bleed off. And then I'm gonna close it. And then once I close it, Luis is gonna press the pedal again and leave it down. While he's doing that, I'm gonna have to open this again and get the air out until pure oil or pure brake fluid comes out of here. Once that's happening, then we are completely bleed off on this side. So you cannot just open it and hope that all the air is gonna come out. You need this is a two-person job on doing this. Make sure that you keep checking the level of liquid on the brake reservoir, because if that drops, you're gonna start getting more air into the system. So if you're doing two pistons in the rear for the brakes, you check this level here and there. You don't want to let it drop all the way, and then you start getting air into the system. So now I got my container, my hose into it, and then I'm gonna I tighten this, and I'm gonna tell Luis to press the brake. And now while he's doing that, I'm gonna open and bleed off the air until liquid comes out of here. And then we are gonna continue on doing this until we see just liquid. Press. Release. Press. Release. Press. Suelta. Presiona. Suelta. So now as you can see, there's just oil in this line and there's no more air coming out. So we are done bleeding this cylinder. So now we have, as you can see, it's free spinning. And now he pressed on the brakes and I can no longer spin it. And as you can see, now he's pressing on the brakes again. So we had so much air on that system that we couldn't bleed that air out of the system before. So now that we have a new cylinder, we have bled out all the air and now we have a working system on this side. So all we have to do is just put the nut, put the pin, and we're done with the job. So now that we have put the nut back on, we put our pin through, and then you want to make sure that one of the groups is lined up perfectly with that hole so this can go through all the way to the other side, and this is going to keep this nut from spinning off. So everything's back on. We have the pin and the nut and everything's tied up. We bled up the system and we have everything put back together as it should. And now we have brakes on that wheel. Now look guys, and this is how much oil we lost in just bleeding one cylinder out. So if you do all four or two wheels on the rear, you're gonna lose all of it and you're gonna start getting air back into the system. So we top it off before we move out to another cylinder. One thing you wanna do is before you start bleeding the air out of this cylinder, you wanna have your drum installed. So you wanna have that on before you start pressing on the brake and trying to bleed the air out of there, because if you don't have that drum on, the piston is going to burst in pieces because it's just going to pop out because the drum is not there. So you want to put the drum in there before you start bleeding the air out, so that way this holds the integrity of the brakes when you're doing that. Otherwise you're going to have pieces everywhere. Well folks, hopefully this video was useful and helpful how you can do this this brake cylinder replacement at home, so that way you don't have to take it to shops and you save a lot of money. And this was for a 1958 to 1967 Volkswagen Beetle and 1958 to 1967 karmann Ghia. And it's pretty simple. All you just need is a component. You can take your time, do it without taking it to shops and saving a lot of money. And for folks who are watching our video, haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. If you like our video, give us thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here in el canal de Chano Jose.